Well,
Thanks,
look who's here, back with us now, the chairman of House Judiciary. He's Congressman Jim Jordan. Chairman, thanks for joining us. Have you?
My pleasure.
This first question: Have you or your committee heard from the IRS yet? You know, they basically, what is the IRS saying to you about showing up out of the blue at Matt Taibbi's home?
Well, we know what Yellen said today in a different committee hearing. She said she didn't really know anything about it, but she also said this usually doesn't happen unless there's some kind of criminal matter. We know that's not the case. In fact, the IRS owes the journalist Matt Taibbi, they owe Matt money. So I don't know. We haven't heard back from the Treasury Department or the IRS. What I do know is, and this was mentioned in the previous segment, that this happened under the Obama administration with Lois Lerner and all. And I do know during that crisis, when we were figuring all this out, that they were targeting conservative groups, Danny Warfel was brought in as one of the interim guys to run the IRS, and now he's the guy back in charge of the IRS. Well, so I don't know if there's any connection there. What I do know is this sure looks like it's more than a coincidence that it happens the very day he's testifying.
You know, Fox Business has been calling the IRS. They're not returning calls. They're not answering. Are they saying anything to you? Because you gave the IRS a hard deadline of April 10th to turn over documents and communications, including with the executive branch and the White House. So are they saying anything at all to you?
No, we haven't heard anything. But we want those communications, Liz, because, again, context is critical here. The day before Matt Taibbi testifies, he learns that the FTC, a different federal agency, wrote Twitter and said, who are the journalists you're talking to, and named Mr. Taibbi and Mr. Schellenberger by name. Those two journalists then testified the next day in front of our committee. During that committee hearing, journalists were, the Democrats were asking these two journalists, who are your sources? I mean, a direct attack on the First Amendment. And while they're asking those kind of questions, the day after the FTC did what they did, there's a person from the IRS who shows up at Matt Taibbi's home. Didn't call his accountant, didn't call him, showed up at his home, left a note and said, we'll be back in touch on Monday. He had to think about what that means for a typical family. You got to think about that the whole weekend, for goodness sake.
Right.
This is frightening stuff, and it sure looks like intimidation of some sort. Again, that's why we want to know what the communications were. Was there more than just the IRS involved? Was this one of these new 87,000 agents? Was it a brand new agent hired with this $80 billion? I don't know, but we want to get answers to all those questions.
Yeah, we'll stay on the story, too. Let's listen to the Treasury Secretary, Janet Yellen, testifying about this today. Watch this.
I also sit on the House Weaponization Select Subcommittee. A couple of weeks ago, we had a journalist before us, Matt Taibbi, who, by the way, is not a conservative. He's an independent journalist, but is known to be progressive or to the left, not to the right. And during the few hours that he's appearing before Congress, an IRS agent appears at his home and leaves him a note. Are you familiar with this? Are you aware of this?
No, I'm not.
I've told you about it. I need to ask you, with the direct oversight of the IRS, does that bother you?
It's certainly something that I would want to look into. I'm not aware that IRS agents do that, except, as you said, in cases where there's an investigation
that's exactly right.
For law breaking that's underway.
So, Congressman, she wasn't aware of it. It sounds like she may try to dig into it. We're not sure if that will happen. But, Congressman, you know this. The IRS answers to their paymaker. They answer to who gives them their money, their wages, their salaries, their budget. You know, that's a Democrat-run Senate Finance. They listen to dog whistles in D.C. So is this what's happening here?
I mean, that's a great point, Liz, and I think very insightful. It may, in fact, be. But first of all, the idea that she didn't know about it, understand, when these cabinet secretaries come in front of Congress, they get briefed, they get asked questions. Many times there's a mock hearing that takes place. The idea that they wouldn't tell her about this story that broke yesterday and she's coming the following day to testify, I find that hard to believe. I find that almost as hard to believe that happened as that the whole thing was some kind of big chance or coincidence. So, but I think you're right too. It's like when you go back to the Lois Lerner and the targeting in the Obama administration, there was never going to to be an email from President Obama to the IRS saying, go target conservative groups. They didn't need that because Obama stood in front of the United States Congress at the State of the Union and went after the Citizens United decision while Judge Alito sat right there in the House chamber. So they didn't need the specific thing. They got the marching orders, as you said, from this broader message coming from the administration.
Yeah, it's a dog whistle. You know, listen, the IRS is a brutal bureaucracy to work under. There's also the Treasury Employees Federal Union. They routinely, the majority, 90% or more of their donations goes to Democrat politicians. Let's get your reaction to Attorney General Garland testifying today about the Biden White House getting the DOJ and FBI to target school board parents as domestic terrorists. He appeared to not know key details. Watch this.
Internal communications showed that the DOJ and the National School Boards Association extensively colluded prior to your memorandum back on October 4th of 2021, which inserted federal law enforcement into local school board meetings. Do you know how many citizens were tagged with this threat?
I don't know. I think the FBI returned that there were, in their own subpoena response to Mr. Jordan, I think there were around 20.
22 to be exact, and 6 were actually investigated by the Counterterrorism Division of the FBI. Citizens of this country who were trying to make their voices heard at their school board meetings and instead were tagged by the FBI as terrorists.
Congressman, were any of these school board parents, to your knowledge, arrested?
No, that's the fundamental question. I was going to make that point. No one was charged. No one was indicted. And we released a report on this a week and a half ago. In our report, we cite a U.S. attorney. Now, again, a U.S. attorney in the Biden administration, Democrat U.S. attorney. And that U.S. attorney said, this looks like a completely manufactured crisis. There's no reason for this to get the federal government involved. So that's not Jim Jordan saying that. That's not Ben Klein saying that. That's the U.S. attorney saying this is manufactured and it was done for political reasons.
And there's this. GOP Representative Republican Katie Britt tells AG Garland her team got training materials showing U.S. Marshals were actively discouraged and explicitly told to stand down, do not arrest protesters demonstrating at the homes of Supreme Court justices last year when doing that is against the law. What do you make of this?
18 U.S.C. Section 1507, you're not supposed to be protesting in front of a Supreme Court justice's home with the intent to impact and influence a decision, which is exactly on point. That's exactly what was going on. But no, we're not going to arrest people for actually committing a crime, but we are going to send agents to a journalist's home and put a note on an IRS agent put a note on his door at the exact time he's testifying in front of Congress. I mean, that is the Biden administration now, and it's scary.
All right,
scary.
Congressman, thanks for joining us tonight. We'll have you back on the show.